I love Toy Story. I love Toy Story so much that if Toy Story was a person, I probably... Point is, I love Toy Story. It was one of the first films I ever watched, one of the first films I ever fell in love with. Shoot, my first video on my main channel was about Toy Story because it was the easiest movie for me to analyze since I knew that movie like the back of my hand. Yeah, you can call me a diehard fan of this trilogy. And I also like Toy Story 4, which is probably sacrilegious to some Toy Story fans out there who said that Toy Story 4 ruined the franchise. And I too thought a fourth Toy Story movie was unnecessary, but I remember loving it when I first watched it. And it looked like a lot of critics and general audiences loved it too. So color me surprised a few years later when I found a lot of Toy Story fans tearing apart Toy Story 4 like it's a war crime or something. Some of these videos are pretty interesting though, like they went really hard on Toy Story 4. So in honor of Toy Story 5 coming out and in a desperate attempt to try to, get a leg up on the YouTube algorithm, I wanted to make a video defending Toy Story 4. But after rewatching it again for this video, I can kind of see where some people are coming from. I mean, it's definitely not a perfect movie. I still think it's a good movie, but there's some problems with it. But there's some general criticisms I still don't agree with. For example, Bo Peep. A lot of people did not like how Bo Peep was treated in Toy Story 4. Yes, she's not the same person that she was in the first two movies, but like she was never the best part of those movies. Like I don't think there's any like diehard Bo Peep stands from the original two movies. She was always just the support and nothing else, which is more of a product of when those movies came out and not what her full potential could have been. Granted, the way that they wrote her in Toy Story 4 felt like more of an overcorrection so she could fit with the more modern female leads in 2019 and like the 2020s essentially. But I think she's fine. But to me, I think it's easier for audiences to see why Woody fell in love with this version of Bo Peep compared to the support therapist that she was in the first two movies. I mean, she's actually like kind of assertive and a leader like Woody is. So I don't know, they complement each other in a lot of ways. I think they make more of a believable couple than they did in the first two movies. But that's just my opinion. But there are other criticisms I actually agree with people now after rewatching this movie. For example, Ducky and Bunny. They weren't as funny as I remember them being. Now, I love Key and Peele, who are the voices of Ducky and Bunny in this movie. In fact, I became a huge Key and Peele fan around the time this movie came out. So I was excited to see them within the Toy Story franchise. But after rewatching it, I don't really think they fit in this movie. It's not Key and Peele's fault though. Like they were just probably just doing what it was asked of them, which is, acting like themselves for this movie. But I feel like Key and Peele's sense of humor doesn't really fit Toy Story's sense of humor, if that makes sense. So I can see why a lot of people didn't really like their inclusion in this movie. Another thing that I agree with is how they wrote Buzz, which that's something I've always agreed with even when I first watched this movie. I thought Buzz's inner voice bit was cute, it was funny, but it doesn't really reflect the person that Buzz has become after the original trilogy. But I think the most divisive part of Toy Story 4 is Woody's decision to leave Bonnie, which is a decision I agreed with even after my most recent rewatch, with some caveats. A common argument against this decision is Woody would never do this because that goes against his character. Oh, a toy's purpose is to always be there for their kids, so Woody's decision makes him selfish. But if you look back at those first three movies, this twist actually makes sense. It's just not very well set up in Toy Story 4. Let me explain. The Toy Story franchise has been interpreted in multiple different ways. Some view the movies as a metaphor for parenthood or childhood and the process of growing up. However, I view these movies as a metaphor for life itself. To quote my very embarrassing Toy Story video from 5 years ago, but please don't watch, being a toy is pretty much a 9-to-5 job. They get fulfillment out of it, obviously, because we see the toys generally want to be played with and have a fear of losing their roles, but it's still a job at the end of the day. Woody starts off the movie as Andy's favorite toy, pretty much making him the leader or the manager of the other toys. Once his position is threatened by the cool new toy, or Buzz Lightyear, his arc in this movie is accepting that he won't always be Andy's only favorite toy and learning to be okay with sharing the spotlight. Toy Story 2 adds a fun wrinkle to a toy's purpose by adding the idea of what a toy should do when a child doesn't want to play with them anymore. When their whole life's purpose is suddenly just taken away from them, do they find their own happiness by their own hands, or do they stand by their kid? This is the dilemma Woody finds himself in after Andy damages him and simply doesn't want to play with him anymore. When faced with the opportunity to be loved by millions of children all around the world by being put in a museum after a crazed toy collector kidnaps him, which is, that's a fun little story. You should watch the movie if you want to, hear more about that. Woody is tempted with abandoning everything that he knows, his friends, his way of life, and his kid, all for the security of being loved for all time. Woody ultimately decides not to pursue this after his little pep talk with Buzz, which makes him realize why he loves being a toy, a child's toy. And people often use this moment as a reason why Woody would never leave Bonnie, because they think he learned a lesson in Toy Story 2 to never leave his kid, and it would be out of character for him to do so. But I personally don't see it this way. Yes, toys can exist to be there for their kids and potentially to be played with, but I don't think that should be the only purpose they have to live for. Because like people, toys shouldn't be defined by one singular purpose. They should define their own purpose. I don't think it's necessarily bad for Woody or even Stinky Pete to be immortalized in a museum if that's what they want to do. Pete is only the bad guy because he forces his views onto the other toys. The same thing Lotso does in the next movie, and I guess Gabby in the next movie, but she doesn't really get her comeuppance in that movie like the other bad guys do, even though she arguably does worse things than Stinky Pete and Lotso, because he manipulates Forky and then she makes Woody cut out his voice spot. But that's another side chain. That's something that a lot of the Toy Story 4 haters talk about, and that's something I also agree with, but that's another topic. But they all just operate on their own philosophies based on their worldviews. Woody's philosophy that people claim to be a toy's purpose are just choices he makes based off his worldview at the time. He chose to go back to Andy in Toy Story 2 because he felt like he'll get more fulfillment by being with Andy no matter what at the time. But at the end of Toy Story 3, Woody chooses to leave Andy and stay with his friends and make another child happy because he feels like that will make him happy, instead of going with Andy to college. Then he chose to leave Bonnie after not being fulfilled with her to pursue a new goal of helping other toys, which I think is a nice conclusion for Toy Story 4 to come to. It just didn't properly set it up. I think the best thing Toy Story 4 introduced to the franchise is the idea of a toy finding its own purpose outside of what's expected of them. But where Toy Story 4 falls short is its execution of that idea. And that's something that I only realized after my most recent rewatch. I remember the idea of a toy defining its own purpose being a prominent theme throughout the movie, but in reality, it's only really brought up twice. The first time with Woody and Forky's conversation in the beginning that made Woody question why he does what he does, and the second time when Woody says he has nothing left to do except keep Forky safe. So what is that, 15% of the movie spending time with this theme? And the other 85% is a bunch of jokes about Buzz being incompetent and introducing new toys played by popular celebrities. I think the main reason why this movie didn't work for a lot of people is because the movie didn't know what it wants. It tries to meld together a lot of different ideas, which left the movie with a very confusing tone, which is probably a product of a lot of behind the scenes issues, which could have caused some last minute rewrites and structuring with a lot of key members leaving or getting fired. I remember when this movie was initially unveiled back in 2014, it was pitched as a romantic comedy detached from the original trilogy. So I guess that's where the reintroduction of Bo Peep came into place. Then a few years later, when they unveiled the teaser trailer, that's when they introduced Forky, which was a very cool concept. Like a toy made from a kid that comes to life on its own. That idea alone could have been its own Toy Story movie. But in the back of my head, I was like, okay, where is Bo Peep? Bo Peep didn't even appear in the teaser trailer. So I'm like, how does Bo Peep tie into all of this? Then literally the next day, that's when they announced that Key and Peele were gonna be a part of this movie. And like I said, I was excited about Key and Peele. I was a fan of Key and Peele at that time period. But again, in the back of my head, I'm like, how are they gonna tie all these different elements together? And long story short, they don't really tie it all together. The movie is just what the movie is. Despite all these ideas working on their own, they didn't really meld in a very cohesive way. I know I said earlier that a lot of general audiences love the movie, but I do remember, or even after I first watched it in the movie theater, there are a lot of people complaining about Woody leaving. I remember one lady was saying it should have ended with all the toys coming together with Bonnie, or one guy said like you can't do Toy Story without Woody. And at first I was thinking like, oh, like maybe they didn't understand the movie, because I was like, oh, I get the movie. I'm like, I didn't think I was smarter than them, but I was like, no, they just probably didn't see what they were trying to do. But like, no, like rewatching the movie again, I think because the movie didn't really focus on its main theme of like, you know, a toy finding its own purpose, what is the meaning of life essentially, I think people just didn't really understand what's going on. But despite all of its issues, I still think Toy Story 4 is a good movie. Just an extremely flawed one that's unfortunately the worst mainline Toy Story movie. Lightyear still has the title of the worst Toy Story movie, though. That is not a great movie. I was very kind to it in my review after I watched it, but now I think about it more, that movie was awful. But going back to Toy Story 4, it introduces a lot of great ideas. It just didn't stick the landing. Now, as of me recording this video, Toy Story 5 has not come out yet, and it's so crazy to me that they're making a Toy Story 5. I think Toy Story 5 is a terrible idea, but I like the premise of toys versus tech. Was that's something that Honest Trailers predicted like literally 10 years ago. Look back to that video. But I like this premise of toys versus tech so much that I think it should have been the plot of Toy Story 4. Same idea of Woody leaving Bonnie and his friends at the end, but instead of Bonnie prioritizing Forky, it would be Bonnie prioritizing her new tablet. I think if Woody's main reason for leaving Bonnie was because of tech, I think that would have been an easier pill for a lot of fans and audiences to swallow, because, you know, tech has kind of taken over all of our lives, especially since the mid-90s when this movie first came out. Or, you know, they could have just stopped after 3. I think we wouldn't be having this conversation right now if Disney didn't make another Toy Story movie, but you know, here we are already at the 5th Toy Story movie. Or, you know, make good spinoffs. Like Shrek was able to make good spinoffs with the Puss in Boots movies, or at least Puss in Boots Last Wish. So why didn't Toy Story make a good spinoff? And isn't Toy Story supposed to be a better franchise than Shrek? Anyway, that's the end of the video. Let me know what your favorite Toy Story movie is, if you have one. And do you agree with my opinions, or, you know, am I just blowing a lot of hot air? I don't know. But anyway, thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.